Welcome, everybody, to another week of Legal Tech Week, the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and legal innovation over the past week. Today is February 10th, 2023. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I have the blog Law Sites and the podcast Law Next. And a bunch of our usual panelists are back here today. Hope everybody had a good week. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. Jean, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'm Jean O'Grady. I'm the author and editor of Dewey B Strategic, which covers legal research, technology, KM, and anything else I'm interested in. I also write for the Legal Tech Hub blog.
All right. And Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM.
Joe Patrice.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer. And I guess this week my official title has become like official thorn in Jonathan Turley's side, I guess. Although I'm getting some competition from Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz on that one, it looks like.
Do you get a pay raise for that or something? Is that a new title?
He just wouldn't stop this week. It was
And Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Embry. I write the blog All Crossroads. I'm also this year's chair of the ABA Law Practice Division, and I will shamelessly plug the ABA Tech Show, which is coming up on March 1 through 4 in Chicago, and would certainly welcome everybody and hope people can attend. It looks like it's going to be a really great show this year.
And if you go, don't miss Startup Alley on the first night of the show where we do our pitch competition. We've announced the 15 companies that are going to be participating this year. It's a really mixed group of people, mixed group of companies. Unusual mix, I think, a little bit for this year's show. So that's going to be fun.
And if you're going to be there for that, get to the room early because it's usually standing room only.
mhm.
That's right. That's right. I don't even know where we are this year. Are we in the same room as always, or
I would assume so. Yeah.
We'll find out. I'll find out when I get there. All right. Well, you may have thought we talked enough about do not pay and ChatGPT and other such things last week, but we've got more to talk about on all of those this week. But I kind of feel like, given that it's Super Bowl weekend coming up, that maybe we ought to start with Steve's pick of a story this week, which brings together legal tech and Super Bowl somehow. I don't know, or legal and Super Bowl anyway.
So, who would it's as Bob Ambrogi once said, someday will be malpractice not to use data analytics in litigation, and it'll someday be malpractice of some sort not to use legal analytics in placing your Super Bowl bet, apparently. But this is kind of funny. Roy Strom of Bloomberg wrote this article, and he went back and he looked at the Kirkland and Ellis profits per partner and then compared those with the cost of a 30-second ad for Super Bowl, and he had this nice little graph, and they track pretty closely. Sometimes Kirkland and Ellis's trajectory was above, and sometimes it was below. Just for sort of background facts, the profits per partner for Kirkland and Ellis in 2021 were 7.4 million. Last year's Super Bowl ads for a 30-second spot was 6.5 million. That's kind of interesting that you can get profits per partner that are greater than the cost of a 30-second Super Bowl ad. But in any event, but here's the really fascinating thing that he found. So when the Kirkland and Ellis profits per partner for the last year, that would be 2022, are greater than the cost of last year's Super Bowl 30-second ad. You with me now? When that happens, then the team with the quarterback who never played in a Super Bowl before will win. So that usually happens, not always. 3 out of the last 4 times that's happened. So the question is whether you think the Kirkland and Ellis profits per partner for 2022, we don't know those yet, but if they will exceed the cost of last year's Super Bowl ad, which is 6.5 million, then you would want to bet on the Eagles. And that actually, and Roy concludes, and I agree with him, that's actually a pretty good bet because in 2021, the profits per partner were 7.4 million. So they only have to, they can even take a 12% decrease in 2022 and still be ahead of last year's Super Bowl ad cost. So putting all that together, I'm betting on the Eagles.
I'm not a bidding person, but I think I will too.
And to think I was using the fact that Patrick Mahomes has a high ankle sprain, but that seems much more.
That's right.
Very
Kudos to
old school,
Roy.
Joe. Very old school approach, Joseph.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm like the bad guys in Moneyball. I wasn't paying attention to the analytics here.
I'm gonna be in touch with Roy when it comes to the NBA Finals and the World Series and see what he can come up with for those two.
The tracking
Provided that
is
he's
remarkable,
right.
though. The way it tracked is really remarkable, though. I mean, if you look at Roy's article, and he's got the graph showing the tracking between the price of an ad and the profits per partner at Kirkland, and they're just entirely on par with each other. It's just bizarre.
I have this sort of mental image of Roy sitting down with a glass of bourbon, sort of contemplating, what can I write about? I wonder if there's, profits per partner, Super Bowl ads. There must be some correlation there.
Amazing.
Yeah, but how did he draw the correlation to that firm? Even was there something that somebody must have dug that up, right?
So I will say, I don't know why he chose it, but it is a good one because like when I was coming out of law school, Kirkland was not all that. It was like a mid-tier whatever. And it's a firm that kind of has gone on a ride from middling to the top of the game, kind of along the same trajectory as ads have gotten more expensive at the Super Bowl. So it makes a lot of sense. It's not like one that's had ups and downs, like say, Poor Sherman and Sterling.
Yeah, I'm trying to see it. I don't see anything in his article. It must be in his article somewhere about how he drew that correlation. I'm not seeing it though. Well, he's just prescient, I guess. We'll have to get him back on the show. He's been on a few times. All right. Well, are you putting money down on that, Steve, or is that
A limited amount.
limited? Okay. Well,
All
sure.
right. Grease up the poles around his house.
So we can talk, I guess, a little bit about Do Not Pay and Joshua Browder again, only because there was a connection. I happened to interview him on my podcast this week, and it happens that the fact that I interviewed him on my podcast followed directly from our show here last week, because he there was we were talking about it last week, and one of our panelists, I think it was Nikki, kind of made a comparison to him being the Elizabeth Holmes, is that the name? Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes of the legal tech world. And apparently he was listening to our show last week, and wasn't too thrilled with that comparison. So he called me on Monday of this week, emailed me, I think, over the weekend, said, can we talk Monday? I said, sure. And we got on the phone, and he was talking about that. And I said, how would you feel if I recorded this call? And he said, sure. I said, well, actually, I need to go to my office and get my podcast stuff set up. So how about in about an hour or so, we'll record? And he said, sure. So it turned out we just had a conversation about all this stuff that I wasn't quite anticipating we were going to have, but it's an interesting conversation. I've been getting raked over the coals on social media for going too easily on him, and maybe I did. I mean, I certainly could have been better prepared for the interview, which I wasn't. But I pretty much feel like he raked himself over the coals in the course of the interview by a lot of the things he said. Starting from describing the entire controversy over the last few weeks as a bit of a Nothingburger, and really downplaying the research that Catherine Tucson had done into his applications, downplaying some of the backlash over the so-called publicity stunts around offering $1 million to go to the Supreme Court and sending a robot lawyer into traffic court. and dancing around this issue of whether he forged charity donations, not charity donations, buying up debt, Medicare medical debt, and writing it off. Even since then, there's been more allegations, around the issue of whether, in fact, he kind of made up a lot of the numbers back when he first started and talked about all the traffic tickets that they were able to resolve back in 2015, 2016, whenever that was. That came out before I interviewed him, so we didn't talk about that. But it was a fascinating interview. It really, I think, raises a lot of questions about him and about the company. I in some ways, I when this all first started to break, I kind of felt like maybe there's two sides to these stories, but the more I hear him, the more I feel like he was just digging in deeper and deeper on these issues. I mean, a concern I've raised is one, Stephanie, you guys did a really good job this week, or you did rather, really good job this week, kind of rounding up some insight on the sort of bigger question of what does this mean for kind of justice tech in general.
Yeah, and a lot of that actually came out of 2 weeks ago on this call, and some of those people were just commenting in this chat, which is how I reached out to them and got thoughts on it. But I think it's interesting that people thought you went easy, because while I was listening to it, I even said to my coworker, "Oh, Bob's not pulling punches. This is good." I thought you did actually press him on. I mean, in a nice way, not like attack him, but he sort of came to me. He came across as very defensive, but also like he was being persecuted, and there's a lot of, I don't know. It was because in that 2 weeks ago, I wasn't even on last week. 2 weeks ago, somebody in the comments compared him to Elizabeth Holmes. It wasn't just Nikki. So, but yeah, it's sort of still unresolved. I mean, a lot of the people, I'll put the link to my articles that, it's sort of the question of, is there such a thing as bad publicity for something that doesn't get publicity much? But there's sort of a divide, and it's actually not surprising, but I didn't think about it. So a lot of other people I talk to who are sort of building these apps and these social justice apps, especially if they're women and women of color, they're like, well, we can't afford to, have a big spectacular failure. We need to think this out, and we need to do this. And I think that's just sort of the impression of, he just was, he's just sort of like a rich kid with a lot of money, and he can afford to play fast and loose, and damn the consequences.
Yeah, I loved the quote in your article from Devshi Maratra at Justice Tech, where she said, while I agree the legal industry is in desperate need of disruption, moving fast should never come at the expense of the integrity of our work. And,
exactly.
I think that really sums it up well.
Yeah. And yeah, it was convenient. I was planning to have this article go up anyway, and so I was able to quote your Nothingburger. It's sort of, not, well, I guess his Nothingburger, but it sort of sums up the whole thing of, he's acting like this was no big deal and people overreacting, but the fact is people are trying to do this work and don't have the access to the spotlight or the money. And just like someone said, it just leaves, whether or not it's ultimately a bad thing, it has left a bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah. Yep. Any other insights on that?
Well, I just feel like he's not the first tech entrepreneur to engage in outrageous hyperbole. I did not hear your interview. I'll have to go listen to it now. But, I think most of the hyperbole has been aimed at large law firms, and nobody cares if they have to spend a lot of money on dud products. But It's not the first time.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of it too. He's just approaching this like any other tech experiment and not really taking into account that this particular thing he's working on involves real people and people who need help.
Yeah, yeah. And he pretty much admitted that he, never really expected anybody to take him up on the $1 million. He said he was prepared to pay it if anybody did, but he didn't really expect that to happen. I've expressed before on this show some surprise at the fact, when he said he pulled the plug on the robot lawyer in court plan. Excuse me, that he had somehow been surprised that prosecutors had threatened him about that, and I was, I said, hadn't you thought about this? I mean, didn't it occur to you that you might get in trouble for this? And he said, well, I thought maybe they'd come after me after the fact, but I didn't think they'd challenge me up front. Excuse me, I'm sorry. He still has yet to show any evidence that in fact prosecutors did come after him. I mean, I asked him, others have asked him for the letters, and while we were on recording the podcast, he pointed me to a document sharing site where he's saying he was going to show this, and then all that was there was one letter from a lawyer in Virginia to the California bar saying, please stop this guy. I don't want to get him in trouble, but please stop him, basically. And I mean, kept talking about lots of lawyers writing, but again, we haven't seen all those letters. And I have no doubt that lawyers were complaining. I mean, they would do that, but you just kind of have to take everything he says with a grain of salt at this point, I think. And that's too bad. I mean, it doesn't bode well for that company and all. You really have to wonder what the future is for that company. And you do have to wonder about the impact on whether others start looking at other justice tech or consumer facing legal tech products with some suspicion. I hope they don't, but
right.
I mean, it's good to be suspicious about any product. I mean, it's good to be
right.
Ask questions and try and test it. We now have Catherine Tewson as an example of how to do that and how to do it right, I guess. And hopefully others will follow suit.
But I mean, I guess I was also sort of struck by his whole tone of just, he felt like he was being persecuted. But also, like, at no point did he even just say, like, obviously none of this is my intention, but I'm sorry if it hurt anybody, or if it had a bad effect. Like, I don't think it had a bad effect, but I'm sorry if it did. Like, he could have even said that.
Right. Yeah, there was absolutely no contrition or what in anything he said. Really tone deaf, real tone deafness about all of this, and about how to respond to it.
Right. I agree.
So, all right.
Did you convey to him that we could easily set up a moot panel for way less than $1 million with some real law professors and stuff if he would, which I still would be interested to see what it does.
Right. And that's how it should have gone. I mean, if he had done that as an experiment, it would have been fantastic. People would have been into it. Yeah.
So I did actually
say
that.
With a bar tab. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, good. I'm sorry. I've been buried.
Yeah, I did. Well, I did say something to him about, had you considered just trying to reach out and see if there's a friendly judge out there who would let you do this as an experiment? Not doing it through subterfuge, but doing it in a cooperative way with a judge. And he said something about I'm grooming a judge in San Diego or something like that.
He said, I'm greasing a judge.
Greasing a judge. Okay, yeah. Greasing a judge in San Diego. That I hope is going to let me do that.
That is what he said.
Okay.
Another unfortunate turn of phrase.
Yeah. It was very that gives you the whole sense of the tone of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he the other thing he did is he described, I think, a little bit more how he actually planned to do this. I mean, he talked about the person was going to go into court, not with AirPods, but with Google something glasses or something that have a hearing that have sound in them, and that in fact the judge would ask a question and the person would wait for do not pay to tell the person what to say. But he said they had sort of carefully picked a case where they thought they could get the case dismissed on procedural grounds because certain things weren't done properly in advance. They had done a request for the information in the case and the request was never granted. So they thought they'd be able to just get it thrown out on that grounds. So it wouldn't ever be anything where the pro se litigant would have to tell anything about the facts of the case or the law of the case. Basically would just be going in and saying, I made a request for information, it wasn't granted, therefore my case should be dismissed.
Yeah, he said they specifically picked one where there was no evidence that would have to be discussed. Because I thought your question was good. You're like, if they're supposed to just repeat what you say, how can it answer something about evidence? And he's like, we picked a case that didn't have any.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll see what happens there. Well, let's see. That's our do not pay conversation for the week. What about our ChatGPT conversation for the week? Seems like we always have to have a ChatGPT story every week.
And I didn't even bring it up.
And you didn't even do it.
I know. I thought Joe did it first, so I'm like, let him have the moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, ChatGPT, who again, now last week I got cut off at the very end, I assume by the robots who were mad at me for making fun of ChatGPT. But like, look, I as loyal listeners of the show know, I am not the world's biggest fan of this. I think it is a useful first step to something, but I think that it, as it generally exists, is largely drawing from bad data and therefore gets bad garbage out results.
I mean,
Which is
Sam Altman kind of said that himself. This is a preview.
Yeah.
This is not, yeah.
Well, and this is why I wrote that article last week that we talked about, which was that if you pair it with a data set that is trusted, then that is how you should implement it going forward. And that's why I liked what we were hearing out of Ironclad using their existing playbook. Here, we've now learned that there is a Colombian judge who wrote an opinion through ChatGPT. So all of your fears are happening. That said, one thing, though, I will say as an addendum to this is this wasn't my story. It was Catherine's story here at Above the Law. So I didn't want to necessarily focus on the things she did. One thing I will say alongside it is that there's a study that's out there. Legal Cheek has done a lot of coverage of this, that U.S. judges apparently are very open about how they have been increasingly using Wikipedia to write their opinions. So maybe ChatGPT ain't so bad. Like comparatively, maybe I would trust that a little bit more.
Well, I feel like your point, which is like I've been screaming into the wind for the last month, and now finally people are there. Like, it's not about ChatGPT. That's just a toy that came out. That's not the point. It's the technology underneath it, the models, how you train them, how you use them, how you incorporate it. Like Ironclad, that's a perfect use. Lexion did that with projects like 5 weeks before Ironclad. Like Docket Alarm was doing it. Like, it's not. Nobody should be using the actual ChatGPT tool in law. And I mean, Sam Altman would say that. He said that when it first came out. But apparently they are using it for to write opinions now, which is, I mean, there's another thing in South America, like in Brazil, there's an AI program called Victor that they've been using for a while to determine like who can actually appeal to the Supreme Court. So it's like, there's some crazy stuff going on out there.
Yeah.
I guess I wonder though, do they have like U.S. common law style citators so that judges at least have a backstop against using bad law in their opinions? I mean, are they just relying on because I guess it comes back to sort of an ethical obligation, like, fine, it does a draft, but then what do you do with the draft? Do you go and validate what you found?
Right. I don't know.
So Colombia is...
Yeah. Is the actual opinion available?
See, now this is what I get when I choose somebody else's story. Colombia is
yeah.
I was just going to say, Colombia is a civil law jurisdiction, because I do think that is an important distinction here. Yes. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, didn't he use ChatGPT to kind of for medical research in this opinion? It wasn't legal research. He was writing about a medical issue of some kind. Am I remembering that wrong? And the way he used ChatGPT was to try and bring some information into the opinion about this medical issue, if I recall right. Maybe not.
It is about insurance coverage, but he asked it to answer certain legal questions that were based on medical conditions. Okay. So he asked it questions like, is an autistic minor exonerated from paying fees? So
I see.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, that's a little scary because obviously we had the conversation the other day that when we asked this particular tool about the gay rights cases, it said that Clarence Thomas wrote the same-sex marriage legalization decision. So maybe he didn't write Obergefell, and it can be wrong about that. So that's a little scary.
Yeah, right.
But I do wonder if the civil law thing is a big deal, though. Like, it makes sure that it's a little bit more grounded.
Well, we've been talking about a lot here, and Gene, you kind of raised the question of since everybody's talking about what does that mean? What does that bode for the whole legal tech conference circuit?
Yeah, I actually went through the recently released Legal Week conference. There was one session that was explicitly about ChatGPT, but I thought there were lots of sessions involving AI and other where they could clearly become a ChatGPT session. And I just wonder how much it's going to dominate. You know how like at one point, Legal Week was almost an e-discovery conference, and I wonder if in a year from now, Legal Week is going to be a chat GPT conference or a large language model conference.
Well, would you like me to do? Is this where I get to do my shameless conference plug? Come to Legal Week. Yeah, I mean, the schedule was set a while ago, and then they added a 3-hour workshop on Monday about generative AI, not ChatGPT. I'm very strict. It's not just ChatGPT. I mean, in terms of how it could be used, what are the ethics of it, how it actually works, things like that. So they added that 3-hour session, and then it will definitely get worked into some other sessions. Like I'm on like the future state of the industry panel, and like obviously AI is going to have to come up, and there are other AI panels, but a lot of the content also is sponsors haven't necessarily said what their content is, and they've bought blocks, and so I don't know how much is going to be put in there, but they're definitely adding it in. But I mean, Legal Week is such a broad audience that not everyone wants to hear AI all the time, but it's definitely working its way in. And I have a feeling I'm going to find myself on a lot of panels as the days go on. I mean, this is not controversial in ALM. I am like the resident AI expert within ALM right now. But so yeah, they added that formal session for sure. But you'll see it. You'll see more of it in there. But also very conscious of the fact that it's not the only thing in legal technology. Yeah. So does our press pass get us into that 3-hour seminar? That's what I want to know. Probably. Okay. Are there limits? I don't know.
Does it get you out of the 3-hour seminar? That's what
Well, Bob, I also had the post that I found on Reuters about Google's big launch and misfire of BART this week, where they actually posted a question, a little video of a question, and their BART gave part of the answer was wrong. So, but what's really shocking to me is that there was nobody at Google that it even occurred to do a little due diligence around it.
There are 2 people at Google that are being fired this week. That person who didn't check the answer, and the person who didn't have the phone ready for their phone demo at their big announcement. Did you watch the Google announcement from Paris? No. They're like, okay, and now we'll do a live demo from the phone, and the phone wasn't there.
Yeah, it was an interesting moment.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried the new Bing with the ChatGPT incorporated?
I keep meaning to.
I did a couple. It didn't give me appreciably different results, but I did, I feel like I need to have a more extended time with it to find something that's more lost. We'll see. Because I do think there are certain situations where I can press it, especially if I start thinking of articles I wrote forever ago and seeing if it can find them based on a couple of words I remember. That's the hardest thing for Google. And so maybe that'll be something Bing can do.
But does anybody think this is going to erupt into an equivalent of the browser wars back in the 90s when Netscape versus Mozilla, where everybody's going to be trying to push their search engine and somebody is going to become dominant and everybody else is going to fade away?
I mean, I'm currently talking to people about that. I don't have the answer yet, but yeah, everyone's posing this as, this epic battle between Microsoft and Google right now for AI supremacy. And I mean, does that matter? I mean, do we care who wins? I don't know.
What I care about is, is it going to get easier for me to find what I want, or is it going to make it easier for people who are paying money to push me into the things they want me to see instead of me getting the answers I want,
Yeah, I think, I've gotten really frustrated with Google. So, I think the opportunity is really there because of the advertising. The advertising on Google has just gotten way out of hand. And you do a search and it's like, half the page is just sponsored results, and you just can't get to what you want. And, it's also, I think Google has intentionally obscured results that used to be easier to get to. Not just for advertising purposes, but maybe some of it may be copyright purposes or that kind of stuff. It used to be much easier to search texts of Google Books used to be a great way to go in and search book texts, and a lot of that is no longer available on there. So I'm ready for Bing or whatever it is.
I can give you a good example. It was really hard for me to find a story about Google's flop this week using Google. I had to go to Bing.
Right.
I can't believe I'm saying this because I never thought Bing would be a thing again, but I'm excited to see what they do, because Google's just on their heels and they're panicking because they've dominated for so long and no one's been able to challenge them really, or has tried.
Yeah, and I think there was something like they lost $1 billion in market value after the flop.
It was like 143 billion was the last figure I saw after that hallucination in the Bard ad. Yeah.
I think that one of the interesting things to me is, Microsoft is so embedded in the legal community, and now that they are apparently going full bore into this, into Bing and artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. It's an opportunity that we may see more lawyers becoming more familiar with these tools just because they're now Microsoft tools, and we've used Microsoft forever and we know it, and can't say we understand it, but it is familiar. So I think it'd be interesting to see it. At the ILTA conference, I think I commented on the fact that Microsoft seemed to be everywhere in everybody's workflows and everything else. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
and I was just gonna say, they've also had a relationship with Lexis for a long time. They've been pretty tight with Lexis, and Lexis obviously has some really valuable, they would have a reliable data set in terms of legal content.
And that's exactly your point, Steve, is exactly why I was covering a little bit Microsoft's increasing involvement in their investments in OpenAI, just because, strictly, Word is not technically legal tech, but Microsoft has such a stranglehold on the legal industry that it might as well be. And so I think that's why the results of this epic AI supremacy battle might matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
matter to us, even more so than other industries, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think back to Gene's point, I think the likelihood probably is that, I don't know whether it's going to be like the way eDiscovery dominated conferences in the past, but certainly over the next couple of years, it's already, I don't know about you guys. Well, I do know about you guys. You guys get the same press releases I get. And already, like every press release you get is talking about GPT or AI in some different way. They were all talking about AI before, but now it's all GPT. It's just going to continue this way for the foreseeable future, I think. I think, did we talk about everything everybody picked? Because if not, we could. There were a couple of deals this week. I know, Stephanie, you had one. I had one that I highlighted, which was the acquisition, I guess you want to call it, of Litify. I almost said Filevine, their competitor, but of Litify by Bessemer Venture Partners, which is took a majority stake in Litify. Kind of interesting, I think, on a couple of different levels. One is that Bessemer has been a big investor already in legal tech, including Clio and Disco and several other companies. Filevine, it's kind of rumored that they were getting shopped around for a long time. Again, I said Filevine again.
I was going to say
Litify. Joe and I are on our way to the Filevine conference this weekend in Salt Lake City, so I have Filevine on my mind because I'm speaking there on Monday. But they are very much competitors, and you have to kind of wonder whether they time this announcement knowing that the Filevine conference is coming up next week. But Litify is kind of interesting because it's built on the Salesforce platform, and it evolved out of Morgan & Morgan, the largest plaintiffs law firm in the country, and it was originally kind of getting developed as an internal practice management platform when somebody realized, hey, maybe we have something here that's a product, and they spun it off into a separate company and built it up. And originally their market was mostly PI firms, but they've expanded into the mid-firm range.
Who came to that decision? Was it Morgan or was it Morgan?
Or both of them.
That's fine. Yeah. Go on.
Morgan.
Are there two Morgans? I've only ever seen John Morgan, the guy you see all over the billboards and stuff. But who's the other Morgan? His son? He has a son who works.
I mean, wait. Is this going to be a bigger scandal than any do not pay thing? Like, is there only one Morgan? Like, is this? Is there an evil twin that's coming back? Like, and this is now going to dominate my evening.
Is the other Morgan actually just a bot of some kind?
Yes, it's ChatGPT
being controlled by Joshua Browder.
But yeah, on the note of, because you said Salesforce, on the note of how AI is everywhere now. I mean, I didn't read it, but I saw a headline about how Salesforce is going to make a whole generative AI move in some way. There's too many headlines. I didn't read it all, but.
Is that right? Yeah, I didn't see that either. So what was I gonna? So I lost my train of thought. Anyway, it was interesting. I mean, they are. I was going to finish saying just that they've started PI, but they've kind of moved into the mid-firm market in a big way, and they're going into corporate legal. And they actually said in my interview with them that they expect that by next year at this time, their customer base in corporate legal will be larger than their law firm customer base, which I thought was interesting. And then Stephanie, you also covered a deal this week, right?
Yeah, Macro, which kind of, you can do a Filevine transition in a way, because unlike Filevine, they're not trying to create a new document format. They're actually playing nicely with the ones that currently exist. But Macro got, that's their website, not my story, just kidding. They got 9.3 million from, largely led by Andreessen Horowitz. So it's just another example of VC investment in legal tech now. But Macro is actually kind of pretty cool. There's a whole productivity suite, and it's doing things where, like you were saying, they built their own word processing tool, which nobody's done. Microsoft has done it and Google has done it. Nobody else has succeeded in doing it. And so they've actually passed that hurdle, but they're not trying to necessarily, like I said, they're not creating their own file type or anything like that. But they got to that point. They did this release. I was actually talking to the creator last night at Christian Lang's Legal Tech Meetup reignited last night in New York. And some of the people in the chat were there. But it's like, obviously this investment was huge for them. They had a very busy day and they're getting like a lot of more customers now, but it seems to be, from everything I've heard, people have kicked it around pretty heavily. I mean, they're a Lex Fusion member, and the guys at Lex Fusion have tried to beat it up. In their words, they beat the shit out of it to see if it worked, and it works really well. So it's exciting.
And for what it's worth, that company was a contestant in last year's Startup Alley at
nice.
ABA Tech Show. They were operating under the name Coparse at that point, Coparse, and they since did a rebranding. But yeah, a lot of good, and actually a lot of good companies come out of Startup Alley at Tech Show.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a really cool product. I remember when I first heard about them, I did get a demo way back when they were first starting up, and really unlike anything anybody's doing in the word processing space. So
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, excited.
That's all I got. Anybody else got anything they want to talk about?
We can talk about AI art. Stability AI, or Getty suing Stability AI again in this country. They did UK first, and now here, still trying to figure out the copyright issues with AI generated art.
Interesting. And I will throw in that Troutman Pepper had a cybersecurity breach, which we wrote about. It knocked out their network for a bit. My take on it, I mean, a lot of folks have other things to say about it. My take on it was more that this is an organization that it seems like, yeah, by all accounts, nothing was not compromised, which is good. They're working diligently on it, but it also seems like the, oh my God, what happens plan was not in place, because the emails that they were sending folks were, all right, okay, so if you have a personal email account, start using that. And then, maybe you can get documents on your local system, which very much seemed reactive to the situation. And query whether or not using personal emails is good or bad, or something they're going to have to deal with on the back end for document retention reasons, yada, yada. It definitely seemed like they did not have a plan for, oh my God, if this happened. And so I just was very much like, protecting data from actually being compromised is only the first step. There's a longer road after that.
Yeah.
Yep. And just related to that, I saw that the New York City Bar Association was also the victim of a ransomware attack recently. Not a lot of details on it, but apparently they've been posting, the attackers have been posting files, including passport images, somehow from that were found in that attack. I emailed people at the New York City Bar Association for comment, and they have ignored me.
I did not get a comment from Troutman Pepper. Actually, other publications, I believe ALM managed to get a comment from them. I was not able to because, they didn't have email. I actually don't know how ALM got a hold of them. I thought about emailing, and then I was like, what am I talking about? This screen cap I have says we do not have email.
That was not my desk, so I cannot answer that question.
I know it was American Lawyer, but yeah. No, I guess they had a phone number. I did not handy, so I was like, yeah.
Well, the problem with email, once there's a cyber attack, is that's the thing that's going to spread it. I mean, that's why that has to be shut down for so long. Because I know I was in a firm that had a cyber attack a couple of years ago, and everything, we were all talking to each other we had to create, actually, that might be part of the recovery plan, is to have had everyone's personal email addresses and phone numbers as a backup. That may just be the plan, because the other that attack from several years ago, the problem was it was like a time bomb, and nobody knew where the traditional thought was, well, if you go back a week, we'll be safe. But the virus might have been planted 6 months ago or a year ago, and then went off a year later. So you don't know what is the point in time where it is safe to recover from. That's what I remember was the big takeaway from the cyber attack I was in. It's so hard to know what is compromised in order to rebuild.
Yeah, I should find it. It was a contributed article I got recently about it that said something like the average time that attackers are inside a system is something like 260 days or something. Like that was crazy to me.
Well, before they reveal the
Right.
fact, yeah.
Well, in some ways, my assumption, again, I don't necessarily know as much about this, but others can correct. My assumption is they have decent concerns that there might be a 10-day, 14-day sweep that will catch them. So they're like sitting to make sure, am I embedded enough that this is not going to get caught, you know? So they really have to wait part of it is that they want to be entrenched, and part of it is how good we are getting at dealing with cybersecurity, because part of the reason they wait that long is they want to make sure that there's no risk that their threat can be instantly sloughed off.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well,
you know, if they want to be if they want to be a surveillance balloon, they don't want to get blown up instantly. See, now I'm newsjacking the most important story of the week. There you go.
Was that the most important story of the week? I guess
you're taking over transitions for Bob.
Right.
Well,
I have nothing to transition to.
Do our privacy laws protect us from China's surveillance balloons? That's the question.
I mean, look, the best meme I saw about it is all that balloon was trying to do is warn us about our expiring car mortgage or car warranty. And we shot it down for no reason.
Really? All right. Well, I think that's it for this. That's it for this week. We will. Some of us will be back next Friday, assuming Joe and I survive Salt Lake City.
Oh, yeah. How long is the Filedine conference?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No, Monday.
Yeah.
Is it Monday, Tuesday, and then they have the ski day Wednesday or something? They're having a ski day.
I think that's right. And I leave like Wednesday morning.
Me too. So, I'm leaving Wednesday morning.
Joe, you're not a skier? With glass in hand skiing?
Listen, I would love a ski lodge. I don't know as though the skiing is really my speed.
You know, I am a skier. I just didn't feel like bringing all my stuff, like heavy winter clothes and stuff, and whatever.
Now that you say ski day, I realize I was invited to that conference. I totally forgot.
You remember ski day, forgot the conference. I like that.
No, I was like ski day. Yeah. I don't ski, so I wasn't jumping on it, but yeah. Now it rings a bell.
Yeah, I mean, it actually looks like an interesting conference. I've never been to it before. I think this might only be the second time they've done it. I'm not sure of that. Don't quote me on that, but so we'll tell you all about it next week. And if there are if the exhibit hall is full of ChatGPT, we will tell you about that too.
You're gonna be nicer to them than you were in your write-up, Bob.
Well, actually, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. I think I'm doing this like fireside chat with their guy who was their head of innovation. I'm not sure if he's interviewing me or I'm interviewing him. I'm not entirely clear on that. But I think we're just having a conversation. And that's one of the things we identified to talk about a little bit, is their .vine format that caused such a stir for a while.
Yeah.
It's actually not a bad. I mean, when you actually see it in action, it's basically a document automation format, and it's kind of cool. But they had, I think, a little bit overplayed it, so that was the problem there.
Yeah. That was their super ambitious PR, right?
Yeah. Those PR people just get in the way of things all the time. Right? All right, good. Well, we'll see you all. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I hope, Steve, you make a lot of money in your bet, and we'll be back next week to find out. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.